It's time for Mac Geek Gab, and listener Bruce brings us our quick tip of the week with a follow-up from last week. There is a very simple way to show or hide normally invisible files in the Finder, and that is by pressing Command-Shift-Period. More quick tips like this, plus your questions answered today on Mac Geek Gab 979 for Monday, May 1st, 2023.
And welcome to Mac Geek Gab, the show where you send in tips like that. And it was that particular tip came from Bruce and Eric and Ben and Wayne and so many of you. I missed it during the show because I wasn't paying attention. Next time I endeavor to do better. But you send in quick tips like that. We share your quick tips. You send in your cool stuff found. We share cool stuff found. You send in your questions. We try to answer your questions. We stitch it all together into an agenda. And the goal is such that by doing all of that and following through the agenda, we each learn at least 5 new things every single time we get together. Sponsors for this episode include Kolide.com/MGG, KOLIDE.com/MGG. We'll talk more about what you will get when you go there, but it's awesome. Zero trust, tailor-made for Okta. Cool stuff. For now, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Brown.
And here in Lee, New Hampshire, is Pilot Pete, listening to the British jets going home overhead. I think they're gone now.
Okay. Yeah. It's been loud over my house and then Pete's house as a bunch of jets are leaving from Pease Air Force Base, right kind of down the road from us both. So, All right, let's get into this cool stuff, this quick tips here, because we have yet another follow-up. In fact, we've got some great quick tip follow-ups here. We were talking in episode 978 about the tip for moving among messages in macOS and using Control Tab or Shift Control Tab. And Scott says, rather than using Control Tab, which I find unnatural to use within an application, he says, I use it to shift between applications. I simply changed the keystroke in Settings, Keyboard Shortcuts, App Shortcuts, Messages to use Command Up arrow and Command Down arrow. That makes more sense to me. This is one of the coolest things about macOS, that you can set your own keystrokes to do things, and you can make them system-wide or app-specific so that they aren't getting in the way of what Command Up arrow and Down arrow do in other apps. It's very cool. And then he shares, so I like that. So thank you for that, Scott. He also shares a bonus tip, which is sort of a quick tip revisited. He says if you've got contacts pinned, you can use Command 1 through Command 9 to access up to, you can have 9 contacts pinned and you can access them that way. By the way, pinning contacts is not just about individual contacts. You can pin group chats as well. So if you have a family group chat or a work group chat that you want to pin, you can pin that too. Anything that's a chat can be pinned. So hopefully lots of quick tips there for you. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I got. Yep. That's what we got for today. Actually, no, that's not true. We have more. John, we have one from Henry, also a reference to show 978.
Yes, we do. Last week's iOS Safari tip reminded me of another feature available when the address bar is fully visible. If you swipe left or right on the address bar, you'll switch to your next or previous tab. And if you're on the very last tab, swiping left will open a new tab. You can tell you're on the last tab if there is no hint of another address bar peeking in to the right of your current address bar. By the way, tapping on that little bit that peeks in will also take you to the next tab. Similar thing on the left for previous tab, but those require more precision than swiping.
Yeah.
I find that harder to do.
Interesting. Yeah. And this is on iPhone and maybe iPad. I can't remember how so far. Probably not iPad, because on iPad you actually get to see your tabs at the top. So yes, this is on iPhone. Yeah. I like That's good. That's good. Yeah. I like it all. I noticed the other day if you are a Twitter user who recently lost your ability to use SMS for two-factor authentication, if you like had a check mark before and then it went away, you need the check mark on Twitter in order to have two-factor authentication using SMS. And so it will force you the next time you log in after you lose your check mark to change that. Or if you haven't been using it, you can't use SMS unless you pay the $8 a month. However, there is still the possibility of using two-factor authentication on Twitter. You just have to do it with like the one-time passwords, and I think maybe there's another way to do it. But I just changed mine to using one-time passwords, which for me I store in 1Password. And so now I'm back to having 2FA on Twitter, and you don't have to pay for the privilege. I guess SMS messages probably cost them something. In fact, I'm certain they do. That's sort of how that works. So they probably limit that to just people who are paying them. But you can still do two-factor authentication on Twitter. Just you have to go in and actually do it again. So it was not obvious to me, the path that they sent me down. It was like, oh, you just lose the ability to do 2FA. I'm like, I don't like that. That sort of worries me. Well, good news. You can go get it back. Just knock on the door a little bit harder.
There you go.
Yeah. I recently, guys, I've had fiber for a couple of years, John and Pete. I recently changed my connection. I moved it, as I mentioned, I think on the show, from the office over to the house because the house has the generator and I just want all the network gear over there so that I don't have to deal with, it just has an automatic generator. So all good to go. So in doing that, I moved from, even though it's sort of the same provider, they changed brand names. I moved from having a PPPoE connection to having a DHCP connection, which all else being equal is way better. My IP address doesn't change 3 times a day anymore. In fact, it doesn't change at all anymore. I don't need to have a router that supports PPPoE, even though I still do, right? Like it's a better way of going about it. The one thing though, is that unlike cable modems, the fiber, at least my fiber connection, and for those of you that I've talked with who are also using DHCP on fiber, the fiber connection stores the MAC address, the hardware Ethernet address of your router in the provider's database, and the provider is the only one who can change it, right? With a cable modem, your cable modem grabs the MAC address when it powers up. And if you need to change, like if you get a new router, you just power cycle your cable modem and then it lets you put your new router in. No problem. You don't have to make any phone calls. You don't have to open a support ticket. With fiber, that is not the case. You do have to open a support ticket to change. Well, I mean, fine. Yeah. But I knew this going in. And so what I did was I asked the tech, because I could have gotten this information myself, but it's way better if I get what they think my MAC address is. So I asked the tech, I said, tell me what your system says my MAC address is now that I'm set up with my router and all of that stuff. And he was like, sure. He showed it to me on his computer screen and I put it in my entry in 1Password that also logs me into, my provider's website, like to pay the bill and all that stuff. And so now I have the MAC address for the device that is authenticated to use on my account. Most routers will let you do what's called MAC address cloning. So if my router blows up and I need to put a new router in, I know what MAC address to tell it to masquerade as to let me back in.
So you don't have to open a ticket.
So I don't have to open a ticket at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning when I have no idea if they're going to be there to answer and help me.
Right.
So.
Well, that's great. Now,
yeah.
Can I go get mine off of can I just look at I should be able to look at my router, see what the MAC address is, and that would be it, right?
Correct. You just want to make sure you grab the MAC address of the WAN port that you are using. Some routers have multiple ports that can be used for the WAN, right. Like the Synology routers, for example.
Have 2.
They have two, and one of here's another, so now the tangential quick tip. On the Synology routers, at least the RT6600, the current one, and this is probably true of others, there's one WAN port and then there's a 4-port switch for the LAN.
Right.
Port 1 on that 4-port switch can also be used for the WAN if you want to have like failover.
Secondary backup, or
in
your case, you were using cable and.
I was. I've turned off cable. Okay. I have it all wired up. It'll take me a couple hours to like call them and have them turn it back on. I wanted to stop paying them $40 a month, so it's fine. However, even without using a secondary connection, I'm not using my WAN port. I am using my LAN 1 port for my fiber connection because that port is the only port of the 5 on my router that supports 2.5 gig Ethernet. And my device from my provider also supports, it'll support up to 10 gig Ethernet. So I figured, why not give it the headroom? I don't need these other, I don't need the one port there. I connect it to a bigger switch anyway. So that's why I can't just read the bottom of my router and say, I know what my WAN port's MAC address is. I do know what my WAN port's MAC address is, but that's not the one that my fiber provider knows because they've never seen it.
Well, so that begs the question for me, is the other one, is that limited to 1 gig?
It is. It is unclear in the documentation. I had to ask support this because I was like, I think there's something broken with my router. I'm like, I'm only getting 2.5 on the LAN 1 port, not on the WAN port. They're like, yeah, no, that's as designed. I'm like, okay. It was just worded.
Think they would flip that around. You'd want your WAN port to be the one that handles the most traffic, and your backup to be, if you got to limit one.
Here's why it's not. I think I didn't ask them this. Once they confirmed for me that it was what I was seeing, I was like, okay, great. I know what to do. Perfect. I'm on it. The reason I think that they do this, Pete, is because that way if they're only going to pay to put one 2.5 gig port on there, by putting it as the first port of the LAN switch and giving it the option of being used on the WAN, you now as the user have the option of saying, okay, I want to use that 2.5 gig port for my WAN, or I want to use it for my LAN connection because maybe I want to plug it into like a network storage device that would benefit from having that, right? And arguably that might be the smart move for me too. Like I don't know that I would ever wind up using more than 1 gig, on my internet connection, whereas maybe I would use more than 1 gig on my
on a NAS drive.
On my NAS, because even though the rest of the ports, and we'll get into this a little bit here just to explain, but even though the rest of the ports on the switch are only 1 gig per second, if you have 2 devices connected to, each port, then each of those gets 1 gig per second. And that means they can each talk to the 2.5 gig port at their own full speed. So assuming the device on the 2.5 gig port is capable of transmitting data, like the hard drives on your NAS can generate data that fast, then great. Okay, you could talk to multiple devices at full speed.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
That does actually. Yeah. Okay. That at first it didn't. It's like, well, that's just silly. Why would you not have your WAN port being the fastest one?
Oh, that sound means I get to tell you about our sponsor, Kolide, and they have some big news. If you're an Okta user, they can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance. How? Well, if a device isn't compliant, the user can't log into your cloud apps until they fix the problem. It's that simple, literally. Kolide patches one of the major holes in zero trust architecture, device compliance. Without Kolide, IT struggles to solve basic problems like keeping everyone's OS and browser up to date. Unsecured devices are logging into your company's apps because there's nothing there to stop them. Kolide is the only device trust solution that enforces compliance as part of authentication, and it's built to work seamlessly with Okta. The moment Kolide's agent detects a problem, it alerts the user and gives them instructions to fix it. If they don't fix the problem within a set time, well, they're blocked. Kolide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration, and most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. Visit kolide.com/MGG to learn more or book a demo. That's KOLIDE.com/MGG. And our thanks to Kolide for sponsoring this episode. And while we're here, I've got a show to tell you about. Look, when the New Yorker magazine asked Mark Zuckerberg how he gets his news, he said the one news source he definitely follows is Techmeme. For 4 years now, the Techmeme Ride Home podcast has been Silicon Valley's favorite tech news source. The podcast has become so successful, in fact, that it launched a venture fund where the listeners to the show are the limited partners in the fund. The Techmeme Ride Home is like TLDR as a service. It's not just the latest headlines from the world of tech. It's also the context around the latest news of the day. It's all the top stories, the top posts and tweets and conversations about those stories, as well as the behind-the-scenes analysis. Guests who have come on the show to lend their expertise include Andreessen Horowitz's Chris Dixon and Bloomberg's Apple rumor king, Mark Gurman. The folks at Techmeme are online all day reading everything so they can catch you up, and me too. I've added this to my podcatcher. I listen to Techmeme Ride Home all the time. So listen to the one podcast anyone who's anyone in Silicon Valley listens to every single day. Search your podcast app now for Ride Home and subscribe to the Techmeme Ride Home podcast. And our thanks to the team over there for doing this swap with us. All right, let's do some questions. John, I think Jedd found an interesting thing.
Yeah, I've actually run into this myself, but Jedd says, just wanted to send in this warning, ? So I have Mint Mobile and never needed a lot of data, but last fall and this spring, I'm noticing that if I have maps on for an hour or three and am driving kids to various sports and social stuff, my data hit its cap. I just checked the map ate up 20 gigs this weekend. That's in like 3 to 4 hours, so I may be going back to Waze or Google Maps. Just thought I would let people know. And yeah, you can see this, Dave, if you go to settings cellular, it'll list your various apps and how much data they use. And I actually had this happen when I switched over to 5G. All of a sudden, I blew my data cap in like less than an hour.
Is that because you were doing a bunch of speed tests?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, really?
No, and then I looked, and I did the same thing. You know, I looked in settings cellular, and weather was taking up gigabytes of data. It's like, why?
Yeah, I remember you saying that now. Yeah. That's interesting. Fascinating. Huh.
The only time I had maps take up data like that was like on a long road trip. You know, last summer we drove to Florida. But I don't recall it hitting my cap right away. I mean, I hit the cap that month, and that's why I switched to unlimited like that.
Interesting.
Matters,
so you did
still throttle you.
But maps chewed up that much, like gigabytes of data.
Well, I think what it was is we were just on the road for 2 days, and so I wasn't on Wi-Fi, and so I tended, like, for instance, I listened to Sirius XM, cheap pilot. Not that audio takes up a lot, but cheap pilot trick here, folks. So we pay for the Sirius XM from my wife's car, and so I get the app on my phone, and I listen to Sirius XM on my phone using Apple CarPlay. So why pay for 2 radios when you get the app and get Apple CarPlay? Yeah, they're probably going to hear that and shut that down now.
No, I don't know how they could, but yeah, that's it. Right? No, that's a smart. I like that tip. I like that. Yeah, I can't imagine why maps would use gigabytes of data like this. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. We haven't heard if others are out there seeing that, though. Let us know. Feedback at macgeekgab.com. Like, we definitely want to know.
Where? Feedback at macgeekgab.com?
Feedback at macgeekgab.com.
That's true. When his email came in, I looked because I just reset my cellular stats 2 months ago on February 22nd, so about 2 months ago. And I use maps almost exclusively while driving, right? It is my mapping app. And I have the same provider. I use Mint. Not that that's relevant here. But in 2 months, Maps is used for me a grand sum total of 469 megabytes of cell data. And that's in my top 10 apps, right? Like in terms of data usage. And I did a trip down to New York. Like I've done some longer road trips, but I use Maps all the time. So I'm curious as to what it would take to get it to burn 20 gigs of data. That's interesting.
That's a lot.
My biggest one for the last 2 months is speed test at 2.2 gigs. Speed test, especially on 5G, if you're getting, if you're getting that 100 to 200 to 300 megabit per second connection, that will chew up a quarter gig per speed test. Just FYI. Yeah.
Interesting.
And by the way, the part about being on Mint Mobile that is relevant is, Mint is an MVNO for T-Mobile, meaning they use T-Mobile's network, right? Because they're an MVNO, there's some part about the deal, I'll say, that means they can't or don't show when you're on 5G versus the 5G UC or whatever T-Mobile calls it, like the ultra wideband, whatever that is. But Mint does support the 5G UC or UW or whatever it is. It just doesn't show it on iPhones, like it does if you had a T-Mobile connection. You'd either see 5G or 5G UC. I think, John, on Verizon, you see 5G and 5G UW. I think, but he'll confirm eventually.
Yes,
right?
I've seen that before.
Yeah, but like you do get those speeds with Mint, even though you're not seeing the distinction happen with the 5G thing. And so I've had some speed tests on Mint that are like over 400 megabits per second on 5G, which is amazing. But that's why I burned 2.2 gigs. So
one other thing about Maps, though, briefly, is that that they're slowly getting the functionality of Waze. I've gone off of Waze. They alert to speed checks and road hazards and that sort of thing. It just needs more people playing. Report the hazards. Report the speed checks.
Yeah.
Although Siri, in her infinite lack of wisdom, hey Siri. Oh, sorry. Hey, yes, lady. Speed check at this location. Yeah.
You deserved that, Pete.
Yeah, I did. For those that didn't hear it, she said that's all good. Nah, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll say, "Hey, yes, lady, speed check at this location." I can't show you that while driving. It's like, oh dear God, make it stop.
Make it stop. That's right. Yep. I'm trying to figure out where I was when I just recently got a speed test for, it was like 420 megs a second. I think it was local here. It was maybe Boston or something. But you can 5G can be fast. It's fun. Yeah. All right. Well, if you do see the Maps using that up, folks, let us know. Like this would be an interesting data point, but I'm hoping that it's unique to Jedd, and especially hoping that it was unique to just that weekend for you, Jedd, and not happening all the time. We got a couple of follow-ups about our discussion on Tailscale in 976, including a big discussion, kind of follow-on discussion in our Discord channel, which I'll put a link to. But, I talked about in 976 how I'm using Tailscale to get to my specific machines, and then how I have my Synology VPN for if I want to get to the whole network, and then I have a separate VPN. I use private internet access if I just want to get to the outside world and not deal with my home network or whatever. And many of you, including Robert, pointed out that you can use Tailscale to be that outward VPN, and it's you set up one of your devices that's sort of permanently at your house or office or whatever. You use Tailscale and you set that up as an exit node. And what that means is that not only can it be a device that you can just attach directly to, but it can also be your path out to the internet, just like a normal VPN. And the nice part is you don't have to set up a normal VPN. You don't even have to have a router that will let you do that because Tailscale will do it. So it just needs to be an always-on device. So your network, if you have a NAS, like a Synology disk station or something, that's the perfect place to do it. But it gets even better. And this was the part that blew my mind when somebody really explained this to me in a way that it finally sunk. And it was, I think, MQ Richards, I want to say, in our Discord. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was something like that. The post is out there. So you get full credit. But the idea was, you don't have to put Tailscale on all of your computers. You only need to put it on one device in your network. And the reason is it supports something called being a subnet router. And what that will do is let you use that one Tailscale device to be the gateway to your network, which means that not only do you not have to install Tailscale on all your other devices, you don't need to, meaning you can access devices like printers where you couldn't install Tailscale anyway, even if you wanted to. So you set up the idea is you really only need to set up one device at home with Tailscale, turn on exit node and subnet routing capabilities for it. And there's docs about how to do this. It's really not all that complicated. And then when you're connected to your Tailscale, you're going through a VPN if you want to get to the outside world, no matter where you are. And you can get to your inside world just without needing to put Tailscale on anything. So I immediately did that. I'm going to stop running Tailscale on all of my computers except for my Synology disk station, and that'll be that. But it's kind of blew my mind that this is the right way to do this. It makes life way, way, way simpler because you can just be connected to Tailscale all the time on your phone and your laptop, and no matter where you are, you just get to all your devices as though you are at your home or your office, wherever your primary network is. Does that make sense, Pete? Did I explain that right? Pete, you are muted. I knew you were trying to talk to me.
Yeah, kind of lost me a little bit, but
okay, that's why I asked. Yeah.
So I have it on the Mac Mini in the basement, and that's the one I run as my exit node when I want to run it.
Right.
But I have to have it on my laptop if I want to be on that network.
Correct.
Okay.
You would want it on your mobile devices, your laptops,
my phone, my iPad,
your phone, your iPad, the things that are going to be traveling away from home with you.
Right.
But I
need it on my Synology drive, my NAS drive, in order to
see. That's what I'm saying. With the subnet router, you don't need it on more than one device at home. Because let's say you make your Mac Mini, right, your Tailscale device, and it can be your exit node if you want it to be. You turn that on or off. And if you go enable subnet routing, now that Mac Mini will not just be a gateway to the outside world, aka the exit node, it will be a gateway to the inside world via subnet routing. They use that subnet routing is the wrong term, right? Exit node, for some reason, like the English equivalent of that makes good sense. It should be an inbound node, right? So it is just the path to your network, and then you use your local network IPs, and you can get to everything from wherever, and it doesn't matter where you are.
Right. Okay. That's beautiful then, because
correct.
Yeah, I mean, I still love it because the fact is, with my other show, I have a ton of data. Well, I need to offload that from my laptop so that I don't have gigabytes and gigabytes of past shows that I don't have anymore.
Correct.
So I put that on a NAS only folder. But I can't access that from the outside world until Tailscale came along last fall.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And now I can get to it from anywhere in the world.
And there is no harm in it that I found in having Tailscale on more than one device in your network. So what you're doing with it on your Mac Mini and on your NAS, like there's no reason to stop that necessarily, but there's also no reason to set that up necessarily. You just set it up on one and then add this subnet routing, aka the inbound node. And then you could via your Mac Mini, you could access your Synology all the time anyway.
Well, then let me ask this, and it may be because what I do now is I go to the Tailscale app.
Yep.
Or right up in the top in the menu bar, and I go down to network devices, my devices.
Yep.
and it shows my disk station there. I click on that, and it copies the IP address of my disk station. Then I go to Finder, and I hit connect, and I use that IP address. I no longer need to do that. I can just go to my 168.4.
Correct. That's correct. You would use the same local IP address
As
whether you're in Dubai or in Lee, New Hampshire.
Or in the living room. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, Dubai or the living room. That's a much better way. Yeah, see, that's the marketing phrase right there. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it keeps you from having all these different addresses for the same devices. All that being said, because of the Boy Scout in me, always be prepared, right?
Right.
If you know that you're going to be accessing your Synology a bunch from remote, you don't, and you're going to need to rely on that because of this data folder that you said you had out there.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be too hasty to remove Tailscale from the Synology, because once you do, it is reliant on your Mac Mini being up and running and not having crashed, or, like Murphy's Law, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
So, like, there's a world where it's okay to do both, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, you turn the Mac Mini off, it won't work.
Correct.
But leave that on there, it'll work even with the Mac Mini off.
Now you got to back up, right? So,
Okay.
yeah.
It's still, it says that these guys at Tailscale are brilliant.
They are. We have a question in the chat at macgeekgab.com/discord from PM Conaway saying, can you only use those features if you have a custom domain? I'm using a Google account. No, I am also using a Google account, and 100% of the features we've just talked about work. So, and most of us who signed up for Tailscale early on are doing the Google account way, because that's the only way it was possible to do it early on. Now you can sign up with a custom domain. And in fact, they just came out with new pricing plans that add more features to all of this, including giving you up to 3 users for free, not just 1 user for free, which is huge. However, those of us on Google accounts still only get 1 user for free, because you have to be on a custom domain to add more than 1 user to your account. And I believe, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, that all of those users need to be on the same domain. That's how it does what it does. And this is why, at the moment anyway, they're working on it, they say, but at the moment, you can only have 1 Gmail user per domain, because otherwise they would let every gmail.com user onto every other gmail.com user's account, and that would be super bad. And so they're not doing that.
Now, that being said, my wife has a separate computer, her own iMac, and I just put my Tailscale account on there, so I don't need another user.
Correct. If you're fine with someone having full access to everything and also being logged in to your Google account, which is fine with your wife, then you're great. Yeah, exactly. So, and you could get creative and create a second Gmail account that's only used for these purposes, and then it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, but I just got an idea, though. Mom's 97, lives in a nursing home. Her only connection to the outside world is the iPad, and that thing is always giving her trouble. I need to put Tailscale on her iPad.
Yes.
So I can give her support remotely.
Yes.
It's frozen up. I can't get email to do this or that.
Yeah.
Now you can.
Hang
on, Mom. I'll take care of that.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
Yeah.
No, Tailscale. Thank goodness for Tailscale. They also, it's worth reading their article. Again, it's linked in the show notes at macgeekgab.com or mgg.fm/979 if you want to go right there. And it'll be in your email box if you sign up for our weekly emails at macgeekgab.com. But they talk about why they are able to offer a free plan for free, and how that works, and how they are able to not just make you the customer or you the product, right? We are still the customer. They know that by doing this, they see more uptake on their paid plans. And so it's the freemium model, not the we're going to sell your data model. And they're very transparent about all this. So it is worth giving a good read. So, all right. More questions? Let's go to Craig here. Craig says, does anyone use the Logitech Circle View HomeKit camera? We have a few, and all of them cut out daily, showing no response. The fastest and only way I've found to resolve it is to switch off the power, cycle the power on the camera. And that works every time until the next time. It's not ideal, especially if we're away and I can't access the plugs. I'm considering buying a couple of Wemo smart sockets, so if we are away, theoretically, I should be able to turn them off and on remotely to solve the cutout problem if it happens while I'm away. Does anyone else have these cameras? Have you had this problem, and have you found a solution? And several of you reported using these cameras and seeing this exact problem. So maybe not so many of the Logitech Circle View HomeKit cameras need to be purchased going forward. That's a little PSA. Anecdotally anyway, there's like 4 people. So, factor that into your purchasing decisions. I have found this though, the symptom that Craig highlighted is that he goes into the Home app and it says no response on the you get that main sort of dashboard screen, right? And you see your favorite devices and your cameras and all that stuff on the dashboard screen for HomeKit. The cameras will say no response there. I see that sometimes with the cameras I have. I have a combination of Eufy cameras, which are, direct to HomeKit support. And I have a bunch of non-HomeKit cameras like Ring and like a Foscam camera and others that I use HomeBridge to connect to HomeKit. And equally with both of those, the Eufy HomeKit cameras and the via HomeBridge cameras, I will routinely see the same no response in the dashboard. However, if I tap on the camera and force it to go and try and talk to the camera, it wakes right up and I see the image live right there and good to go. So there is something about HomeKit being perhaps impatient on waiting for a response back from the camera. I don't know what it is, but if you do see this issue before you presume that you have a camera that's just bogus, tap on it and dig in and see, because you might be pleasantly surprised. You might also be, unpleasantly frustrated. I can't promise what's going to happen. I can just share what happens with me and others that I know. So, do you use any HomeKit cameras, Pete? Do you use HomeKit at all?
I don't. I need to.
Okay. I don't know. I don't rely on HomeKit. I use HomeKit as sort of the convenient aggregate of all of the other things that I use, because sure, I could run the Eufy app or the Ring app to see each of, the separate cameras that I have in those, obviously. But launching the Home app is super convenient because I have everything aggregated there. I've set up HomeBridge, which is a open source engine. I have it running on my DiskStation, but you could run it on your Mac. I'll put a link in the show notes.
So
I have HomeBridge running, which essentially becomes a gateway for all most non-HomeKit devices to be visible and controllable in HomeKit. It's quite nice. So I use HomeKit as kind of the convenient default way to look at it. It's nice because it's available on my Macs, and so I don't have to have the Ring software on my Mac. I can just launch the Home app and see things. But it's kind of buggy, as Brian Monroe in the chat says, HomeKit is just buggy garbage. Well, that's true, but it's convenient garbage. It's right at the tip of my fingers.
Right.
So, I wouldn't rely on it.
The Home. I may have misstated. The Home app is different than HomeKit.
No. The Home app is your view into HomeKit.
Okay.
Yes.
So I misstated it then. I use it a little bit. When S-Lady won't turn off a light or turn on a light, I can open the Home app and go, all right,
Let's go.
My favorite one is, hey, S-Lady, turn on the living room lamp.
Yeah.
And I get the error. The Google...
I don't know why you get that error. I've seen it too.
Yeah,
you get it more than me.
App you needed to have installed to make this work isn't there. I'm like, that has nothing to do with Google. It's a Philips Hue light, and I just told S-Lady to turn it on, and she wants a Google app for it. And I'm like, no, stop.
The Philips Hue light is HomeKit native.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's particularly frustrating. It's like, come on.
That was a really kind way of communicating that sentiment, Pete.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So I do want to take a baseball bat and go hit that HomeBridge down in the basement and
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's-
Yeah. No, HomeBridge has been great because again, it just sort of aggregates all these things together. And now that they have native HomeBridge for Synology, I don't have to run it in a Docker container and manage that. I don't think I should say that, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Now that they have that, I think it's through Syno Community or something. Like it really is not. It's not for the faint of heart. I'm going to say that, but it's pretty good. There's some of the configurations of getting it set up with each of your different things is a little bit of a deal, but you can do it. If you're listening to the show, you can do it. I have faith in you. And if you have any trouble, come to our Discord and ask. I'm there. There's others there using HomeBridge. Like it's a good place it's a good resource. It's like, yeah.
What I haven't done yet, though, and I had a discussion when I was down in Tennessee with my nephew this week, and he's getting ready to do it, and I went, that's not a bad idea, is setting up a DMZ and putting all those Internet of Things devices on that separate from his
You're talking about a guest network, not a DMZ is sort of the opposite of what you would want to do, right?
Okay. Well, I'm thinking he used the term DMZ, but I'm thinking, okay, I want a zone where I put all those Internet of Things that can't access my network.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not what most routers, what DMZ means is, and it's demilitarized zone is the term. And so this is already a misnomer, but fine, is a way of setting one device as the one that gets all of the traffic that just floods into the outside of your network, that your router by nature of its sort of de facto firewall capabilities keeps out. Like normally unsolicited packets that arrive at your router's doorstep are just ignored because your router doesn't know what to do with them, right? Unless you've set up some port forwardings, then it'll forward them. But a DMZ on most routers is port forward everything that I haven't told you about to this other device and let it handle it.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a misstatement of terms then.
Yeah, but what it sounds like he's doing is setting up a separate, like
a guest network. Yeah.
A guest network or some version of that where it's segregated so that those things can only talk to the outside world and not impact his other devices. The problem with that I've always had is, what convenience are you giving up for that? With something like a Ring camera, for example, no problem, because you're never talking directly to, other than when you set it up, you're never talking directly to your Ring camera. It talks to the internet, you talk to the internet, and that's where you meet your Ring camera and actually get the data. So it's a super inefficient thing from a networking standpoint. It works totally fine. Like it's great. So that would work fine. But what if you've got a device that's like, a FOSCAM camera or something where it can do both and you can talk to it locally, which would be all of your HomeKit devices you're talking with locally, right? So now your
then
UFI
you have
things.
to get on that network in order to talk directly to.
Correct.
Instead of your regular network. Yeah.
So I've always sort of felt like it is a solution, but it's a baby versus the bathwater solution. We talk about the continuum between security and convenience, and that's way closer to security than convenience.
Well, and you and I have and John, we have different needs. I mean, in the sense that we are isolated enough that there's not a lot. Now he's in an apartment / townhome complex where there's a lot of Wi-Fi networks able to interact with each other, and people can
they're going to interfere with each other, but they're not going to interact with each other.
I guess I'm thinking about being a place for someone to try and hack and mess around with your Wi-Fi. And,
sure.
And try and get into your network using your Hue Light bridge or your, and I know that's difficult, but I guess my point is the Internet of Things devices, they're better now. Early on, they were totally open.
Totally. Oh, and that wouldn't, whether you're, alone in the country or in an apartment building, like the easiest attack vector is the same. It's come in over the internet and poke that hole in your, off-brand camera or off-brand printer that has, security Swiss cheese in its default Linux core, embedded Linux core where all the passwords are, like defaults or whatever.
Right.
And then once you have root access on that device, then and presumably that device is connected to the network. Now you have access just like you're on the network. So that issue, I mean, it's still potential today, but as you said, like many, I don't want to say most, many, including most of the top name brand vendors have gotten better about this, but there's still those holes. So I get it. Like I get the desire of doing this. You just, I don't know. It feels like more trouble than it's worth for most people.
Yeah. So. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting point. So I'm actually glad I brought it up. Now I see less of a need for it than initially when he mentioned, I want to set it up.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's a need for it, but it's going to introduce complications that you can route around, but it's, it's going to be, you're going to be the one. Well, here's what's going to happen. Let me tell you, folks, here's what's going to happen. So Pete's going to, you're probably not going to do this, but if you did this, here's how the flow works that I've learned over the last decade or so is Pete sets up this new shiny security protocol. And then Pete goes off to travel because he has to. That's how he pays for the new shiny things that he gets. Yeah. And then Pete's wife calls Pete and says, I can't turn the lights on and off anymore. And then Pete calls me and says, Dave, my lights won't turn on anymore. What do I need to do? What do I need to do? So I stop everything I'm doing, and then we try and figure this out. And I ask, well, what did you change? I didn't change anything. And then, within about 15 minutes, we get to, I did that thing that I mentioned on the show. It's like that's when I hit my particularly frustrated moment. It's like, why did you do that?
Right? I told you, you idiot. You were going to have problems.
I told you.
I told you not to do that.
I told you. So, it's just one of the, it's like, but this is true of all of the things that we all do all of the time. I mean, I thank you for letting me, use you as the punching bag on that one, Pete.
Hey,
but like, this is the thing is you presume some of the ripple effects of the changes that we make to our networks and our computers and our phones, like any device. And then there are the ripple effects that actually happen, the ones that we didn't predict. And that's why this show exists. So you send your questions in, feedback at macgeekgab.com. It's great. Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. All right, John, maybe we can do a couple more questions before we have to run today. This has been fun. First, do you have, how do you use HomeKit?
No.
you see what John just did? I intentionally didn't ask a yes or no question, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. I love it.
No, I really, really don't use it. When I look at the Home app, I think my Apple TV is part of the club. My HomePod minis are part of the club, but that's really it.
So you could use HomeBridge to join all of your SmartThings devices to the club. And it doesn't preclude you from using your SmartThings devices the way you currently do. It just adds that convenience layer of putting everything together in that one interface that's accessible on all of your Macs and in Control Center and like all of that stuff. So like I do recommend doing the HomeBridge thing if you have a blend of HomeKit and non-HomeKit devices. Because when it works, HomeKit is super convenient. It's just that, we're talking about maybe 60% of the time. All right, take us to listener John. We've got a couple of Apple Watch things to talk through.
Yeah. John says, I somehow developed a problem on my 24-inch iMac. I try to unlock with my Apple Watch and nothing happens. It works fine on my MacBook Pro. On the iMac, I went to Touch ID and password and flipped the switch to enable Apple Watch. But as soon as I do, it flips back to off. That's frustrating. Both devices are on the same Apple ID, and as I said, it works on my MacBook Pro. Any idea of what is wrong and how to fix it? I don't know. This is a rough one, guys. I mean, I've on my system, I've had the Apple Watch setting disabled, but turning it back on worked. I never heard of it turning itself off again. I mean, a few thoughts. One, restart. I'm sure you've done that already, but, can't hurt. Make sure you have the latest software updates. I seem to recall some of the recent ones had something to do with the watch. And the third thing, maybe it's a cache. Isn't it always?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Maybe clean things up with Onyx maintenance cleaning options.
I like that idea. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen this where when it says that it's on, it doesn't work. And in those scenarios, turn it off, reboot, turn it back on, often fixes it. You've got to have your watch near you. You've got a pair. And maybe that's part of the issue here. Like, is the watch close enough? Is Bluetooth on the Mac? Like, it uses both Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and, I don't know, probably the phase of the moon or something. But yeah, I like the idea of cleaning caches, because if you can't get it to even attempt to turn on, the rest is obviously a non-starter. So, yeah. Huh. Yeah. Yeah.
But mine, I had turned off and I didn't realize. I went into system settings and typed in unlock, and it came up with the ability to go right to, allow your Apple Watch to unlock your Mac. So I turned it on. It came right on. So I don't know what, I've just been using the fingerprint ID, that's
on your
my Mac,
laptop.
Laptop. Yeah. It just seems that's it. Cause when I need to turn it on, I'm already touching the keyboard anyway. So it's right there and comes right on.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm assuming that capability has stayed with all the latest generation laptops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's a
so the need to turn it on with your Apple Watch is almost less secure, because you could be in the next room and someone could, open your machine and turn it.
You'll
right
get
on.
a little notification on your watch.
How often have you learned to ignore that?
Oh, I'm real good at ignoring that. Yeah. I noticed, lately I have been wearing my Apple Watches less, or my Apple Watch. I guess I have two. I have my OG one and I have the Series 5. I've been wearing them less simply because I've been enjoying wearing my, my mechanical watches. I love my mechanical watches. And I have noticed two things. First of all, where I really miss it most regularly is my iMac in the office doesn't unlock anymore. I have to type my password. Fine. Okay. But whatever. That's fine. I wish my phone could be that. If my phone's in close proximity and couldn't it unlock my Mac? Wouldn't that be an interesting way to do it? Anyway, I digress. The other thing that I've noticed, to your point, Pete, is phantom taps on my wrist. I will be wearing a mechanical watch that does not have haptic capabilities. And I will look at my wrist because I am certain I got a notification. And I am wrong. So that's a real phenomenon too. I read about it years ago about people feel the phone vibrating in their pocket. Yeah, that too. Yeah, I don't notice that as much anymore, but I have. Yeah. Crazy. All right, let's stay with Apple Watch here and see. Maybe this is a little bit of a geek challenge, but John, you might have an answer for Mr. Mike here.
I'm not sure. Well, we'll see.
Okay.
Mike says, I'm thinking of dumping AT&T for Cricket, but the latter doesn't have a cellular watch plan. Can I keep my watch on AT&T and switch my phone plan to Cricket? Well, I only have a Wi-Fi watch, so I couldn't test this myself. But they have an article calling Set Up Mobile on Apple Watch, and it's kind of confusing, Dave.
Okay.
And Pete. So they have one section, and it says, your iPhone and Apple Watch must use the same network provider. Okay, that's one statement.
That's clear.
Unless the watch was set up for a family member who doesn't have an iPhone. If you change network providers on your iPhone, you need to remove the previous service plan on your Apple Watch and sign up for a new plan.
Okay.
So the way I read that is you got to reset up your carrier access on the watch.
Yeah. So I wonder, I would love to hear from somebody who's tried this, right? Because I think that little clause in the middle there is separate from the others, right? Because if we take that out, the but, you know, if we say your iPhone and Apple Watch must use the same network provider. If you change network providers on your iPhone, you need to remove the previous service plan on your Apple Watch and sign up for a new plan. Okay. Like that makes sense. This little clause of unless the watch was set up for a family member who doesn't have an iPhone, I think lives on an island. I don't think it's related to the rest of those two statements. However, you might be onto something here. Like if I have an iPhone on Mint Mobile, which Mint, at least at the moment, doesn't have an Apple Watch plan, I don't think, unless it changed this morning or something, and I'm not aware. But let's presume. I can't add my Apple Watch to the plan. Like you, John, I don't have a cellular Apple Watch, so this is a non-issue for me, but we'll go with this, right? So I can't add my Apple Watch to the plan. And because I use Mint on my iPhone, my presumption was there was no world where I could get an Apple Watch and put it on, say, AT&T or, you know, one of the you know, blessed carriers that can talk to Apple Watch. However, what if I treat my Apple Watch like it is a family member, you know, owned by a family member who doesn't have an iPhone, and attach it to AT&T? My guess is what that would mean is I would have to have it on a different Apple ID, and it couldn't be on my Apple ID. This is a guess, but my presumption is that as soon as the watch sees that it is connected to my main Apple ID, the one that was also connected to my phone, it's going to say, oh, no, these have to be the same. I could be wrong about that, but it would not surprise me if it needs to be a completely separate thing so that watch and that phone don't share notifications. They don't share any of that stuff. They're just, you know, they're both members of the same family plan, and that's the extent of their relationship, for lack of a better term. But I don't know. I'm guessing at this, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Can you even have an Apple Watch independent of an iPhone? I don't even remember.
Well, that's what they're saying, Pete, is yes. If you don't have an iPhone, if you're part of a family plan, your family member can set up your Apple Watch without you having an iPhone. And therefore, it can be on a carrier separate from your non-existent iPhone. But I think that's the key point is your non-existent iPhone. As soon as you have an iPhone, now they need to be on the same plan.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. But I like this little geek challenge, and there's a loophole here. There's a loophole in the language. The question is there the same technical loophole? And my guess is no, because otherwise we'd hear about people doing this all the time. But maybe it's just something we haven't heard about.
Right.
Yep. Curt noticed something. Curt says, I have a 2021 M1 iMac with 8 gigs of RAM running Monterey still. He says, oh, this is interesting. This actually, well, it's possible that this my theory holds. He says, I open a lot of windows between browsers and Office products. When I first got the Mac with all the programs running, I would get the message saying I was using most of my memory and running out of memory. Recently, the memory issue, or at least the alert, does not happen. Did Apple fix something? So you might remember, if you've listened to this show for more than about 6 weeks, that there was a period of time where we were talking a lot about all of these memory alerts that we were getting on our Macs and what, the out of memory alert, what does it mean? Do I need to pay attention to it? How do I pay attention to it? What do I do to fix it? What do I do? Is it anything or is it nothing? And we had a lot of speculation. There were certain things that you look at and, okay, you're running out of swap space. You're, doing this. Okay, that's bad. This is bad. But these sort of generic, non-specific memory errors did exist. And a lot of the sort of conjecture and conclusions that we came to was, it doesn't seem to be anything to do. Just ignore it. And now we stopped hearing about all of those messages. And Curt noticed this. So I'm wondering if Curt's right. Did Apple fix it? There have been updates to Monterey, security updates, but Apple's been known to bake some things into these updates that go beyond security, especially nuisance fixes. So did they remedy this problem, or did they just simply realign the alert threshold so that it wasn't so annoying? Because if we were hearing about it regularly here, I also know who else was hearing about it a lot more frequently, right? So I wonder if that threshold was just like somebody said, all right, if we're not going to be specific about this and tell users what they need to do, how to fix it, then we can't be getting these phone calls. And so they just raised the tolerance level. I don't know. Again, more conjecture. I don't know.
Or they fixed it outright.
Or did they fix it? Right. Who knows? Who knows? If they fix that, I've got a list of things I'd like to have them take a look at now that that's off their list, because especially in Ventura.
Like, say, Core Audio in Ventura? I'm just...
Oh, I don't know. Is there a problem with Core Audio in Ventura, Pete?
You know what? Here, Dave, I got a suggestion. We can find out.
Okay.
Upgrade your podcasting machine to Ventura and see if that works okay.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. You tried that already once.
Wait, this sounds very familiar.
It sounds like you tried that, and it was a total disaster.
It was a total disaster. Speaking of avoiding disaster, Pete, you got a cool stuff found for us, my friend, today?
I do. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So I had to find out which one we were talking about. So in my regular updates for security, I got a warning that came across my desk last week, and it said the FBI warns against using the phone charging stations that scammers are using to attack your phone. So when traveling, we drain our batteries on devices. Most airports, hotels, public places have free charging areas and USB ports, like under the seats in the waiting area, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Beware, all right? There's a thing called juice-jacking, and you should avoid using free charging stations at airports, hotels, shopping centers, that sort of thing. And here's how it works. A scammer puts a malware or a monitoring software into a public USB port, and that gives them the ability to steal data off of your phone or even lock your phone up. It could take passwords, addresses, banking information, all that. You know how you have your entire life on that little thing in your pocket? They can get to it. So, what can you do, you ask, to stop such a thing? There's a thing called a Juice-Jack
Defender.
Yeah, Juice-Jack Defender. And I found one on Amazon for less than $6. And essentially what it is, it's a little USB-A to USB-A plug.
Like a pass-through device.
Yeah, a pass-through device. And what it boils down to is it doesn't have any wires inside it that allow data to transfer, only power. So
smart.
You can still charge your device, but there's no route in there by which data can pass in order to take data off your phone or to put a virus or data onto your phone, that sort of thing. So right there, if you're traveling a lot, highly recommend that if you don't carry a battery pack, something to recharge yourself, then have one of these little devices for less than $6, plugged into the end of your charging cord for public use. And never grab hey, look, there's a cord.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, let me just use that. Gee, what could go wrong, right?
Yeah.
They can put data onto...
There is a safety mechanism in the iPhone where you have to allow the device that you're plugged
come up
into.
And say, trust this device.
The trust this device screen. Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But let's say you grab a cord that you just found and you plug it into your computer to charge. It's going to say, trust this device. Well, yeah, it's my computer. Of course I want to trust it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And there's no telling that there isn't something in there.
Yep.
That's how, you know, that the Iranian centrifuges were.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Years ago.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, on the charging front, John, you had a cool stuff found to share with us for today. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I got this for my birthday because I put it on my wish list, Dave.
Nice.
What do you do if you're out and about and you need to charge your Apple Watch, but there's no charging station anywhere? Well, maybe you should get this device that I found called Portable Charger for Apple Watch. And it's a little battery pack, 1,000 milliamp hours, so you will get a couple of charges at least. That's really it.
Yeah. Yeah. What? How much is it?
It's
Yeah,
like $15.
There you go. Yeah.
But
Cool.
that's
Good option
cool.
for when you're on the road and you need to charge your
So
watch.
for the listeners that can't see what we're looking at, it's basically the size of a keychain,
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
little key fob. That
one-
is awesome.
The one thing I will share about this is it has a battery in it, which means if you're flying on a plane, it needs to stay in your carry-on. You can't just put it in your charger bag as a spare and forget about it, because you can't put batteries in a checked bag.
Yeah.
So
Unless you can disable it, turn it off.
yeah, right.
Yeah, that's
right.
a whole.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. There is, for $12, a 2-pack of these little things that I carry, and I always keep one of them. Actually, I keep one in my travel, like my carry-on, and I also have one in my charger bag because for $12 they're cheap, and it is just a USB-A to Apple Watch puck. Similarly, a little keychain thing. I keep a spare of these all the time. I have one in my car. It is super handy to have these around, and I've even been known to just give them away. If you come up to me and ask, do you have an Apple Watch charger I can borrow? It's like, nope, I have one you can have. Here you go, because they're $12. So now I just going to put myself in the poorhouse because everybody's going to come up.
All
and
right,
ask me
everybody
for these
will be
things.
at Dave's after the show.
That's right. Yeah. Speaking of what you would see at Dave's after the show, I've been, me, I like my NASs, my network storage devices, and I like them to be able to run as hardware transcoding for my media library, for my Plex library and all of that stuff. And Synology, up until very recently, was not including hardware transcoding engines in their devices. And so I started looking elsewhere. Talked about QNAP, and QNAP has some devices, certainly has some devices that are very much built for transcoding. I found another brand, though, called TerraMaster. And I got one of their TerraMaster F4 423. It's a 4-bay NAS. It's got a Celeron chip in it which has transcoding. It's the Celeron N5095. So it's a quad core, and it'll do 4K transcoding. I've been testing it for a while. It's fantastic. I like its web-based user interface much better than the QNAP interface. It's actually very similar to the Synology web interface. The one thing I will say, it is dollar for dollar less expensive than the QNAP for features per dollar. However, so compared to if you want just something that's going to do hardware transcoding and you don't want to wait for the perfect Synology new model to appear that would do it, this is a good option to look at. The issue is that Synology has way more features in terms of its apps than TerraMaster or QNAP have. Neither of them has an analog to the Synology Office suite, which I find to be spectacular. I love being able to use Synology Office. It's like you're running your own Google Office, Google Docs, Google Sheets, web-based, collaborative. It's awesome. That doesn't exist on TerraMaster. But if you're looking for a NAS, they do have cloud syncing, so you can run your own, private cloud, just like your own private Dropbox. TerraMaster has that. They have native apps for Mac and iPhone and iPad, as well as Windows and such, and Android. And it's a solid NAS offering, and I like what they're doing. It's pretty cool.
How's their price point, Dave?
The one that I have with this Celeron in it, bare, is $499. So that's about $150 less than you'd spend on a Synology. It's about the same price you'd spend on a QNAP. So yeah, I've been happy with it. It's like I said, it's a solid offering. So that's where we go.
It's always good to see competition and things like that because it keeps the other prices down.
Well, and it keeps like the feature set is sort of the important thing. Like the fact that this exists, the fact that QNAP is doing what they're doing, the fact that we've been saying what we've been saying, and I will reiterate that our community's voice has been no small part of why Synology took a second look at transcoding on what they're doing. The Marius hostings community, similar, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we definitely joined a similar mission with Marius on this, and he joined with us. So it's good to have these things out there so that you can see what the options are and compare and contrast. Yeah, it's good. Competition is great. I agree. That's what we got time for today, folks. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Sounds like the band is playing.
The band's playing, man. Champing at the bit, as it were.
Man.
Yeah. Do we chomp at the
I don't
bits?
want to go.
Do we chomp at the bits? A horse champs at the bit, but do we here on the show, what we're doing, like chomping at the bits? Or are we chomping and spitting the bits? And then you get the bits, and your computer or your iPhone takes the bits and transforms them back into an analog signal that goes into your ear holes, and then that's what we did here. I don't know. It's something about the bits. All right. That's what we got. You got anything else to share, John?
No.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for checking out our sponsor, Kolide.com/MGG. Of course, you can see all of our sponsors at MacGeekGab.com/sponsors. But make sure, please, go to MacGeekGab.com. Sign up for the mailing list there. You get the show notes delivered. We don't spam you at all, unless you consider having the show notes lovingly handcrafted with links delivered right to your door or right to your email box every week. Thanks to CashFly providing all the bandwidth to get the show from us to you. Thanks for hanging out. John, you must have one last piece of advice that's not one word, but maybe 3 words? Can we get 3 words out of you?
Yeah, I see it on Pete's shirt. And the 3 words are don't get caught.
Made on a Mac.
Later. All right. Cool. Fun.